Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us today for our Little Italy of LA podcast. We are thrilled to have you join us. I am Deborah Kobylt, and we are joined by John Viola and Patrick O'Boyle. Hi, guys.
Good to be here.
Thank you so much for bringing us telematically into your world.
Oh, we're thrilled to have you into our world. You are both two of the hosts of the show, Greetings from Italian America, and also, of course, the Italian American podcast. And recently, you both, in addition to your counterpart, came down to our area of Little Italy down in Los Angeles in San Pedro to come and visit us. So thanks for coming.
Oh, it's an amazing time. We
Yeah.
spent a week and a half all over Italian California. Couldn't have been happier.
It was enlightening.
Yeah.
In a really sincere sense, it was enlightening.
Yeah. I mean, when people think of it, go ahead. I could tell that I'm just going to have to give it up. Go ahead.
You could. It's
Go
a choice. It's a choice we make in life, to give up, to not give up. So what I learned, just cut me off when you feel like it. But what I learned, I was surprised, that there's an autochthonous Italian American community there. It grows naturally from the ground, in the sense that it's always been there. You know, if you take places like, say, Southern Florida, there's a strong Italian American presence in Southern Florida. But on the West Coast, it's people from the Midwest, and on the East Coast, it's from New York. But maybe it's at most 50 years old, 40 years old. Maybe really took off in the 80s. But what's different about California is that there is a community that's comparable in age to what we have on the East Coast. And I think San Pedro, I know we had discussed that earlier, San Pedro really drove that home to me.
Yeah.
You know, everybody's from Ischia. There's a strong sense of being Ischitana amongst the people. The establishments have that connection. It's either with the food that they make or we were in, was it Joe's Bakery, John?
Yeah.
We were in, and they had a lace-made image of Santa Restituta, who's the patroness of Ischia, right? Of their town in Ischia. And I was like, okay, wow, this could have been in New York, right? So you could, I should say New Jersey, but it could be in New York. You could just take it up, and the weather was different, right? The weather was different. You know, the surroundings looked different. But there was, while we were filming, because the bakery was closed on the particular day that we filmed, it's their day off during the week, somebody just walked up who they knew for a piece of pizza, thinking that they were open. You know, and it was completely natural. And there was little things like that when you saw that this is a real community, and that there's real people who are a part of it. So, I mean, John, would you concur with that?
Yeah, it was amazing to see a place that's America's newest Little Italy. Right, it only created this designation a few years back, right before COVID, actually. Getting sort of doing advanced work to move into the 21st century. But underneath that newest Little Italy is one of the oldest Italian communities in the country, and one of the strongest. I mean, there's still a huge population down there. We were really positively impressed. And after I lived for a year or so in Southern California, so I never knew it was there. I missed out on such a great community while I was living there.
Well, Los Angeles. I'm giving it up to you. Go ahead, Patrick.
I found, because you try to calculate in your head the dynamics, right? I think that the difference with the East Coast is there's just numerically much larger numbers, right? So if you take New Jersey, which has roughly a population of 9 million, in the last census, 2 million people identified as Italian American. I think that those percentages probably are less in Southern California. So the Italian presence isn't as obvious, but I wouldn't say it's less authentic, because I think that the perception, the incorrect perception, especially the New York metro area, we have New York. It's just us, right? It's just the real. If it's real authentic, it's in New York. So there's no Italian community as good as New York. There's no food that's as good as New York. And as you start to go around the country, you realize how baseless that is and inaccurate. And I think that's one of the, I mean, we were in San Francisco. I had a focaccia in San Francisco. I would fly back just for this focaccia. It was a glorious focaccia. And you have no, it was that good. It was a scallion. It was a scallion based focaccia. And the owner of the establishment didn't want us to film inside. And that's such a New York thing, something you would have here, What are you going to come in for? Stuff like that. And we take it, we eat it outside. And I said, I wish I could get this guy on film because it was such an authentic experience. So the authenticity was there of the surroundings, the antiquity of the establishment. I think it was from the 19th century. It was like the 1890s, 1880s. It opened. All that was there. But what was really, and what I think is very indicative of California, the quality of the food was so good. That focaccia was excellent. I mean, you go to some Italian places around the country, you got to smile. Maybe the food isn't as good as that it is on some other places. But this was outstanding, and I think that's some of the stuff that California brings in: really fresh produce, access to really fresh food. John, what's your take on that? It works in an Italy sense, in that sense that you have access to all that.
Yeah, I was so pleased to see how much the Italian side of California reflects the best of Italy in terms of quality ingredients, the weather. I mean, yeah.
Well, look, I'm from back east, as I think you both know, and I understand the
You're from
the
New Jersey.
personality.
That's on an even higher level. That's an even higher level. They have to be aware of that.
Right, from Avellino, in terms of where I'm from in Italy, my family is, as I think your family is as well, right?
No, my family's from Salerno and Naples, but that's in the same.
Oh,
We're like neighbors. But I
yeah,
grew
we're
up
like,
with all people from. There was a huge amount of people that I grew up with from the area, from Irpina and Avellino, because that's so
well,
dominant in New Jersey.
oh, definitely. I mean, including Tony Soprano from The Sopranos, but
Right.
if you want to sort of include him, if you will. But what I found different about the community from living there much of my young life, and then, of course, living here, um, there seems to be sort of a different attitude. They seem here to be almost a little gentler, may I say that, than the ones back east. From what I recall, everyone has their own sort of distinct personality. But what binds us all together, as you know, just from your show, right? Greetings from Italian America, is so much the history, the culture, the food. And I wanted to get into that a little bit about your show, Greetings from Italian America. What is that? Where do you go? I mean, have you gone down south? Where are you guys finding Italians?
Well, we built the show Greetings from Italian America in partnership with the Italian Sons and Daughters of America, which is actually very quietly one of the nation's largest group for Italian Americans. It's really active in a lot of parts of the country, and they came to us as a sponsor looking for a video version of our podcast, and it was really born out of our desire. This is we are real friends. This is my best friend. Him and my brother were the best men at my wedding. We do all this stuff together. Rossella, our other co-hosts. So we basically said, let's turn a camera and a little bit of organization on our real life, which is essentially us traveling the country anywhere we go, looking for the Italian side of each community. And unfortunately for us, as we started it, and it really started to boom, COVID hit. So our trips were obviously curtailed. So we've pushed back a lot of stuff. We've stayed predominantly around the New York metro area, Connecticut and Pennsylvania and things like that. In the first season that we just completed, we finished with an episode in Baltimore. And our next season starts, I think, November 1st, early November, with an episode here in Staten Island, which is a huge Italian community in New York City. And then our California episodes will come out, and then some of our other adventures. We're going to be down in West Virginia filming, I think Utica, New York. And really, this is what we've done for decades as friends and as professional Italian Americans. So we've got a huge map, and we've got all of the sort of hot spots that people think of, like Boston and St. Louis. And then we have relationships in places that nobody thinks of for Italian Americans that have huge communities. So we'll be going out to Colorado for 2 cities. Yeah, Memphis, Tennessee's got a nice community. Tontitown, Arkansas. Our hope is
to Bois, Pennsylvania.
Yeah,
we found this is the crux of what we've evolved into, is that our job is our mission is to convey information, correct information, that and at least in my perspective of it. And if you take a general 300 and odd million Americans that we have today, they have certain, those who are not Italian American, and some who are but are removed. They have a very kind of like tableau-esque view of what we are and where we are. So they incorrectly think that there's places like maybe South Philly, which is an Italian community, or a place like New York City, Italy, which was an Italian community. But there's Dubois, Pennsylvania. And why do I bring up Dubois, Pennsylvania? John and I were driving from Cleveland with a friend of ours, Joy Vitale, to New York from someplace from an event we had to go to in Cleveland. We're driving, and John has us. John is fantastic at this. He wants to be the king of American red sauce joints. So we got to find out where the red sauce joints are. So we were passing by Dubois, Pennsylvania, which is in central Pennsylvania, and we type in and we find out there was an Italian community there. So we go to a restaurant. They had all the old pictures. They had, the Italians of Dubois, some book like that in the front in the display case. In the next town over, there was an Italian deli where the guy's town, he makes his own sausage. It's the best sausage you're ever going to have. He's very proud of his sausage. There's a bakery there. And who would ever find them on a map? But that's Italian America. They may not be on the radar screen, but there's a culture, there's a heritage, there's a part of the Italian American experience that you find there. So I think that some people look for the big name places like New Orleans, some place like Boston, Philadelphia, but there's also places like Clermont, Pennsylvania, and Shenandoah, Pennsylvania. Coal mining towns that had large Italian American populations. Towns like Dubois, Raritan, New Jersey, Westfield, New Jersey. Places that in some senses have retained their identity much more authentically than places in big cities which have just become tourist destinations.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Very often they are the tourist destinations, if you will. They get the little brochure from the hotel. It's like, that's where Little Italy is. And they go and have a slice of pizza thinking, oh my God, this is amazing. I just went to Little Italy. When in fact, it's more like the tourist district, not to put anything down because they're fabulous in the larger cities as well. But look, I think I remember telling John on the phone when we were talking together, way up in Northern California, for example, there is a small little community. And mostly everyone up there, they are lumberjacks, right? And they work in the outdoors and they're sort of, a tough guy community, if you will, and gal. And it's an enormous Italian community, Italian American community, to the point where there's a book about them that a woman had written. She sadly recently passed away, but to your point, they're everywhere, right? And to find every last corner of where Italian Americans are in America is fantastic. I love the idea of this show. I love it.
You brought up a point. If I could just
go ahead.
Circle back to a point that you brought up, and you highlight the fact that maybe when you go to other parts of the country, you have an Italian American community that's more genteel. I don't know if that's the correct word, gentler. But one thing that if you start to do the history on this, if you take West Virginia, for instance, the base of the Italian population. Now, people never think of West Virginia as an Italian state. Northern West Virginia by Pittsburgh has a huge Italian American community, right? No one sees that. The people in that area were all majority from Calabria, and the majority were from a place called San Giovanni in Fiore. So what happened is you had in the late 19th century, early 20th century, people from a very quiet agrarian town leaving their town in Italy, going to another kind of quiet agrarian area in West Virginia. But so you have country people going to country people. Now you take the New York, New Jersey area, there was a huge amount of people that came from metropolitan cities, people who came from the city of Naples or around the city of Naples. They settled in New York and in the outer boroughs of northern New Jersey or from Palermo. They were city people. So when they came to America, they brought the culture of where they were from. So if you took someone from San Giovanni in Fiore in 1890 and someone from metropolitan Naples in 1890, they're going to have the same personality differences that you highlighted as someone who's from rural West Virginia as compared to, like, I don't know, Newark or Jersey City. So I think that as we go on this journey, we're able to enlighten people about those things. Like, for instance, Youngstown, Ohio. There's a sweet calzone made in Youngstown, Ohio, that's made with smashed chickpeas. You boil chickpeas, you mash them, and you add a little bit of sugar and you fry them, right? This is really a 19th century Calabrese dessert that you probably may not even find in Calabria. You might have to go into a town where there's some very, very old grandmother who still makes this. But that's been ossified, as John likes to say. It's caught in amber now. So even though that very primitive sort of dessert might have not even be in Italy anymore, it's in Youngstown. You know, pasticella is a similar calzone that's made in the Cilento and in Salerno at Christmas time. It's boiled chestnuts mashed up with a little bit of cocoa, a little bit of sugar. It's put in a dough and it's fried as well. If you go to a bakery in Wilmington, Delaware, like Papa's, you're going to find that. You're not going to find it anywhere else because it reflects the community from where they came. These are all those little hints because what we don't want to be is people go to Ferraris in Manhattan. I want the cannoli from Ferraris in Manhattan, which is fine. That's a tourist experience. But there's many textured layers of undiscovered gems that we're hoping to bring to light, besides that Ferrara's cannoli experience.
To today's people, I was talking to someone who's in her very early 20s, and she was telling me, we continue the tradition, but we also continue it in our language, if you will, in our way. I'm not to say that they don't speak the Italian language. I just mean, for a younger generation. Does that make sense? You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
Millennials are a hit because millennials are. I'm a Gen Xer, right? So I'm wired different than they are. But right. I find that millennials are looking for authentic experiences. That's why they're the generation of Instagram, that they're just going all around the world taking selfies. So I think that they're open to this because that chickpea dessert in Youngstown, Ohio, that is 100% authentic.
Yeah.
It's at the Mount Carmel Feast in Youngstown. It's not something that someone made up. It's not a tourist destination. We're going to make this up, something that we're going to try to make look retro. It is retro. And I think that some of these, and one thing we want to connect is there's so many of these establishments that are making products that they don't know how to market. So let's say you have a bakery who's making a very old product. Maybe that's someone who's a boomer or even a little bit older. And they don't realize that the millennial kid is going to think that's fantastic. That's tremendous. Right. They're totally tuned into that. For instance, like in the Bronx, Calabria Pork Store in the Bronx, they make a pork liver sausage that's found all over the south of Italy. I don't know anywhere else. It's delicious. It's absolutely phenomenal. I don't know anywhere else where you could find it, but that's in their display case. And if you're an old timer that goes in, you're going to say, okay, give me 2, 3, 4 pounds of this. But if you don't ask and you're not nosy, you're never going to know it's there. So
hey, I could see. Go ahead.
Sure. So that's part of what we're doing is to say, listen, if you want to find these undiscovered treasures that you're not aware of, we're going to help bring those to your attention.
I can see why they call you the Wikipedia of Italian American culture.
That's very kind of you.
God.
Thank you.
No, it's not me. I didn't call you that. I read that about you, and I'm like, wow, no wonder. Tell me a little bit about.
It's an eclectic collection of information. It's finally people have finally. I finally have a place. I've collected all this eclectic information for years, and I actually have some place to share it, which has been. I have to thank John for that, which has been a tremendous joy for me to be able to share that.
I was going to say, I love that about you, Mr. O'Boyle.
So
let's talk a little bit about your backgrounds. And this time I'm going to start with John. Tell me a little bit about you, and then we will go back to Patrick, please.
I am in every way, really genuinely a professional Italian American. I started my career. I come from Brooklyn and family from all over Southern Italy, my whole family, all my grandparents. And I started in the nonprofit business after studying anthropology and ended up spending 6 years as the president and chief operating officer of the National Italian American Foundation in Washington. And during that time, I mean, I'm a member of every Italian American organization, I think, in the country, or at least active in most of them. And when I was at NIAF, I interacted with the co-founders of the podcast, Dolores Alfieri Taranto and Anthony Fasano. They had done a really great job of building this platform before podcasts really exploded, so had built a nice audience. And they were both sort of struggling a few years later when I stepped down from my position in DC to take it to the next level because of commitments to other jobs. And Anthony had built a bunch of other podcasts and whatnot. So we looked at ways to work together to make sure this platform survived and thrived. And at the end of the day, it ended up that I asked Pat and Rossella to come on. And as you say, the Wikipedia, for obvious reasons, I wanted him as my partner. He's my partner in other businesses. And Rosella's an amazing presence and really very media savvy. And we ended up sort of evolving forward the platform. And took it from the traditional podcast to the YouTube series and Greetings from Italian America, and now we're building all kinds of stuff in terms of returning to normal, live events, and different user experiences on the web, and things that we think will codify this world of ours, this Italian America of ours. So I am absolutely a professional Italian American. I cannot escape. This is what I do and think about and eat, sleep, and breathe.
Absolutely wonderful. And how about you, Patrick? Tell me.
I'm gonna answer the question before it's posed, if that works.
I already posed it.
Yeah, I guess you already posed. So it's a general question covering me and John.
Okay.
So
go ahead.
Let's go to my name. I am a first-generation Irish American. My father was born and raised in Ireland and came to the United States as an adult and went to Jersey City. But my mother's family is 100% Italian American, from Jersey City, and I lived there. I lived in Jersey City in the late 1970s when it was a community in, I guess the easiest way to say is in transition. So I was one of the last people to have the experience of a million Italian relatives living on the same block in houses next door to each other. And then it all suddenly ended. I could remember, and I've been articulating this to a lot of people lately, and I realized that it's now 40 years on, some people don't really understand what happened. You would go into an Italian business with my grandmother, and she would say, like, but do you want the cookies? I'll get you the cookies now, because who knows if they'll be open the next time we come back. Everything was closing. So the urban decay of the 70s, this bakery is closing and that restaurant's closing, and your neighbors are moving and your cousins are gone. And then all of a sudden you had this universe that's just disappearing, right? And you really can't understand why as a child. And I'll go to downtown Jersey City now, and I say all the time, the Lenny Lenape with the Native American community of New Jersey, the Native Americans of New Jersey with the Lenny Lenape. They were there, but there's very few monuments to indicate that they were. And I feel with the Italian Americans in Jersey City, it's not as severe, but it was one of the largest Italian communities in the country, and it's just the footprint is gone, and the businesses are gone, and the civilization of it was gone. And I think it was a great loss to the mosaic, to the quilt that is American culture. And I think that we gave up a lot of artisanal kind of products and authentic interactions with neighbors who we relate to and that we knew for suburbs and fast food. So I think that the reason I collected these stories was I knew the people who were dying, who would tell you this happened here or that happened there. I have this memory. And there was no place to store it because so much of America had moved on. The boomer who moves to the suburbs. So I started to eclectically collect in newspaper articles or stories or vignettes that people told me all this information. And now I feel that with John and I and Rossella and the rest of the team, what we're doing is we have the opportunity to share this information with people for the places where this is still going, where this is still alive.
And I also want to say, I'm going to interject for a second. Sure. How great, though, that we have these kind of platforms, right? Because we really can connect right. Like incredible with the audio podcast, with YouTube, with everything else. Wow, it's like a great connector. I mean, look what you found when you came to Los Angeles, when you came to our area. There's a lot of Italians here, but our area where we have designated Little Italy is new. And we're looking to really, grab a hold of the younger Italian Americans, but also continue with the tradition that's always been there. And I just think this is a fantastic opportunity to sort of bring back what's been lost, right? To your point. And to create new traditions on top of the old, right?
And I think part of it is we want to deliver good news because so many of these establishments have been given the Kool-Aid of it all dies with you. So your kids are going to go on, they're going to get the white collar job that they're supposed to get. You're going to sell enough of pizzas to pay for their MBA. And then your pizzeria is going to die and a fast food place is going to move in, or your bakery or your shoemaker store, whatever. But is anyone coming to tell them that you are part of the artisanal tradition of the United States, that you are a shining gem in the diadem, which is the American experience, which is the vast collection of cultures that amalgamated into a people that made the United States? No one's giving them that positive message. They're giving them, well, I used to buy 10 pounds of sausage, but now all my family's dead and my kids don't come on every Sunday to eat because they're running their kids back and forth to lacrosse. And so I'm going to get 2 pounds and eventually I'll be gone and then you're not going to have a business. right? And that's not necessarily the road that has to go down, because if
No.
you give millennials, or you give younger people who are, and they're not the only people that watch what we do, but it's definitely, being a generation that grew up with the internet, it's definitely a home audience for us. They are starting to see that, gee, when you're passing by Klepmont or Shenandoah or Dubois on the highway, it's worth it to stop off. And if you want an authentic experience, there's Joe behind the deli counter that made the supersad that's hanging in the store. So you don't need to buy the Whole Foods, and that's not a bad, but you don't need to buy the Whole Foods premium Italian charcuterie. What's that word? Charcutier? I never get that word.
Charcuterie.
Charcuterie, right?
Charcuterie.
Charcuterie, when Frank is actually making a Joe or Tony in the butcher shop.
Yeah.
So we're hoping, we're not trying to change history. We're trying to open up avenues that people who want these products and these experience can find the people who are authentically still providing it.
And Deborah, if I could just add to that, one of the things that's so important to us with the platform is, and because we have this younger audience, and that's, harder to come by in ethnic and identity work and in community leadership, we always say, we want to make sure when we talk about the culture, we don't talk about preserving the culture sort of, on a grand scale, certainly preserving and celebrating parts of it, but really also evolving it forward, because, we don't want to lose sight of the sacred for the profane, because, I know families who, like Pat said, have lacrosse on Sunday. They can't do Sunday at Nona's house, but they make a point to have a Wednesday night dinner with their family and recreate it there. And, there's no textbook or rule book to being Italian American. It's an individual experience for 25 million of us. And if you keep, some people, the families stopped making wine or jarring tomatoes. And now we find lots of our listeners turn to the Wikipedia, Pat. And, we've set people up in groups so they do it together. So it's not your grandmother and your mom leading you in the tomato jarring, but it's you and a bunch of our other listeners who are making time as community members to do this. So evolving these things forward is really important for us. And that's the thing I loved most about our time in California, was seeing that courage, really, and commitment on younger generations to do that. Like, seeing how in San Diego's Little Italy, for example, so many new Italian businesses have opened alongside those that remained from the beginning. And in LA, in San Pedro, the restaurants where the third generation was taking over, and they weren't necessarily freezing the menu because, okay, grandpa made this, I have to make this. They were doing really fun and exciting new things and keeping some of the favorites there and building a new clientele while maintaining the old. And like that sort of go west young sun spirit of California, I think, has eked into the communities there. And I was really impressed, because like Pat says, here we just hear people go, nobody's going to be here in the next 2 years and we'll just close it. Or, this not like it used to be in the 60s, so we should close. And in California, maybe it's just indicative of the state. It was like, no, we can do this in a new and exciting way. And
California is by definition chill. Even when it's not, or even when it shouldn't be, right? But it's a state that pumps out a chill vibe. And I think San Pedro was a very, I just keep going back to San Pedro, and it's not to disqualify other places that we went in any sense, but that it's a place that, I mean, how many people, if you walked up and down the street in Brooklyn or in any other, at one time or currently heavy Italian community in Totowa, New Jersey, are going to say, gee, there's a big Italian population in San Pedro, but they're there. Mm-hmm. And they were there, and they're there, and they don't have no intention of going anywhere. The community is changing. It's going from a heavily Italian American community to more and more Mexicans that are coming in. The same thing happened in Melrose Park, Illinois. So you have demographic change, but you have demographic change too in Hoboken. Hoboken had a huge Italian American community that was displaced by yuppies. So you have hipsters, the hipsters.
But you know what?
Evolutionary. So things evolve and they change, but it's not a death warrant of a community. That's another thing.
I think it's the great part of a community, right? In fact, I watched one of your episodes. I don't remember where you were sort of roaming around in a food district, and right next to it was, I believe, either a taco stand or a taco truck. Everybody was getting along just fine. I mean, it was an Italian district, but it also had some of the new, and that to me is what's exciting about our little Italy. Go ahead.
It's not a mutually exclusive. I have an anecdote that I think might drive this home. There's for the sake of the owner, I'm not going to say where it was. there was an Italian American business in a prominent metropolitan area that they had a South American guy who was working there for like 40 years. He handled the front counter. And when the owners were about to retire, their children had no interest in the business that their like great grandparents had started. The Hispanic who worked the register wanted to buy the business, and the owner agreed. But he said the one thing is, I don't want anyone to know that I own it now, because everybody connects the product to your family. So he went on for years running this business and never told anyone that he was the owner. He still acted like he was he never comes around anymore, the owner. They never come around anymore. I run it, but he was the owner. I thought this is a great story because it's so, he was making the exact same product that he was taught to make by the family. But his choice as a non-Italian American to continue an Italian tradition prevented that business from going under, right? Whereas the children were like, oh, we got white collar jobs now, we're out of it, right? And I just said to myself, this is such an American experience. There's a Sicilian business in New Jersey where I walk in and there's all Peruvians working the counter, and they're screaming at the boss in the back in perfect Sicilian with the hard ass. And I said, if this isn't America, right? And they not only were they speaking Sicilian, they were arguing like Sicilians, right? Screaming to him in the back. And I was like, this is, and what part of our message is that evolution and change does not necessarily define an ending. It's just, things will go on, like the Hispanic guy who says, I don't want them to know I'm still running the business. The Peruvian who's screaming back in Sicilian, or people who have just intermarried, right? So people who have just intermarried, but the intermarriage, the Italian American intermarriage of the 1920s were like Sicilians marrying Neapolitans. I mean, that, that'll never happen in my family, right? And that's just, see how far we've come. So we're trying to say it's a positive message. We're not here to write the obituary of these communities. We're here to show that they still exist. Many of them are thriving. They have phenomenal experiences that are Italian American experiences, are very much American experiences. And to people who are fascinated by stories like we just told, we want to tell you where those places are and where you can go to experience these things, but most importantly, where you can eat well. Did you say that, John? If you're in San Francisco, you have to go for that focaccia.
Okay, I just want to tell
the whole trip. I'm sorry.
Before I let you guys, no, don't be sorry, please. Before I let you go, I want people to know what happened before the cameras are on. John didn't even want to come on because we were trying to get his shot straightened out, right? And he goes, I don't even want to do it.
No, Patrick.
That was
Patrick,
me.
Sorry.
Was me.
Patrick, the one in blue. Sorry about that.
Correct.
Patrick was like, John, you take it over. I don't like my shot. I am very glad, Patrick, that you decided to stay with us, because you are such a wealth of so much, and you're a gem yourself. You really are.
Thank you.
You're really incredible. I mean, because you know so much about where you've come from, and you know so much about where we're going. And of course, there's John and Rossella, who could not join us today, but we'll have her on another time. And gosh, I sure hope you come back here to our little Italy in LA. I'd love to show you around here and even some other parts of LA. I'm not sure where else you went around, but what we're trying to do in such a short time that we've been around is very exciting. So I'm glad you guys saw that. I'm glad you got it.
Can I make a public confession now that we're on live?
Oh, sure. Go ahead.
I got in trouble for these 1970s curtains behind me. But the reason I did was I have vats of grape juice that are fermented into wine. And I thought in my basement office, and I thought if I left them exposed, it would look too much kitschy. Is that the word? It looked too much kitschy. But I thought it looked too much like stick. But maybe now I should have had the grape. I have buckets of California grape juice fermented.
Why don't you open it up?
No, I can't.
I didn't know what it was.
Yeah, it's raw because I said I have demijohns. So Deborah, maybe that'll be the next episode. But they're all hidden behind you. I hope you know. So that's why I have my it's my 1970s curtains. I have like buckets and all kinds.
I didn't know what it was. I wasn't even sure if it was your shower curtain. I asked.
No, so they said I had to come on visually. I said, how am I going to hide these things? So I got the 1970s curtains, and I ran curtain rods because they said, how fun is it going to look if he comes on and you have vats of grape juice, grape must, fermenting in the back? But let me tell you, thanks to your grapes from California, your grapes from Southern California, I have the greatest smell in the world right now in my basement of fermenting grapes into wine. So I want to thank all you Californians for that right now. I got a little bit of Southern California in my New Jersey basement.
If I had known this, I would have made you keep the curtains open. Anything else you guys want to add to our interview? There's so much I could ask you, but if you don't mind it, we'd love to have you back. You guys are a lot of fun.
We'd love to fly out. I'd love an excuse to come back.
Yeah, you got.
I mean it.
You got to take us around. You got to take us up to Northern California to the Sloggers community, and any gems out there that you or anybody else in California and San Pedro and beyond, send it our way. You can find us on social media. You can find us at ItalianAmericanPodcast.com. Our Greetings from Italian Americas on YouTube, and we're on all different social platforms. And Pat, like Pat says, first of all, let me say it's amazing that you got him to do video today, Deborah, because he hates it, and he is my best friend, so I say this about him, but he's the smartest person I know, and makes the show, and we really love working together. But we have both been really committed to this our whole lives, and I know if you write us, Pat will. You can send Pat your cell phone number. He'll call you and answer your questions.
He calls me up. I love to talk all day long.
Yeah, he does. So we, send us your leads. Yeah, send us the places you think we should go, the businesses you think we should visit, and that's our mission in life. This is what we do. So we're here to visit everybody. So let us know if you're out there
to eat. Number one. That's the number one goal. So if you have a good eatery, that's like my priority personally. That's my own personal priority.
I'll send you some leads myself. But also, just like what we're doing here, right? Little Italy in LA. I mean, people were like, there's a Little Italy there. It's like, hell yeah, there's a Little Italy here.
And there's a museum. Our dear friend, Mariana Gatto Cavaliere, has the museum there. An absolute
there's so much
spot.
Yeah, there's so much that you can learn. In fact, I think you had one of the guests on that I had on as well. He was recently in a film. There's so much here, not just the wonderful Al Pacinos of the world, but which is what a lot of people think of when they think about Hollywood and Los Angeles. They think about the actors, but there's a much, much richer history alongside of the many wonderful actors that we've produced out here as well. So you guys, thank you so much for joining us. John, Viola, Patrick O'Boyle, greetings from Italian America and the Italian American podcast. You were both a joy. We'd love to have you back.
Likewise.
Yeah.
And we will come back. Whether you want us or
anytime.
Not, we'll just show up. At the Edmonds, we'll ring the doorbell. You can put the coffee on. You feel like you're back in Jersey.
I love that. Put the coffee on. It was like at any time of day or night.
The Stelladoro in the bag, just in case somebody shows up.
And I hate to say it, the Entenmann's, right? What Italian family did not have
Do they have Entenmann's in California? Or is that a here thing?
Yes, but I don't think people buy it so much. You know what I mean? We don't do that. We actually try and look for the authentic little Italian markets where people are making the biscotti, honestly. So Entenmann's are here, but not as popular. Anyway, thank you guys for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, you guys are amazing. Little Italy LA podcast. I'm your host, Deborah Kobylt. Please look these guys up. Their shows, everything. Rossella, she's incredible, and we'll have her on next time too. I'm sorry she couldn't join us. We are available on all platforms, on audio platforms, video platforms. Just put us in there, and you will easily find us. We're glad to have you join us, and we will see y'all next time. Bye bye.
Thanks, Deborah.